Welcome. Glad you're joining us tonight. This is episode 115. Kind of crazy that we've gone through 115 of these already. Tonight, as always, we welcome you to ask questions. I will have a topic rolling, and if you have questions that are on topic, off topic, don't hesitate to throw those in there. We want this to be open forum, and fire away. Don't hesitate on if you have questions you think are mean or insulting. We welcome that as well. Just be prepared for the answer. So tonight was Jesus an alien? This is actually not just a catchy title or something to just grab attention, but it does that as well. I'm sure anybody who's seen this title, including my wife, was like, what in the world are they talking about tonight? I read an article, actually it's not an article, it's a blog by a guy named Richard Carrier. I didn't finish the article because you don't really need to finish it in order to kind of get what he's after in this blog. But he's a guy named Dr. Richard Carrier. He's a PhD historian, and he's this humanistic naturalist that I've never heard those put together. But so far, what I've gathered from the idea of being a humanistic naturalist basically just means that everything can be explained using scientific methods, social and ethical values, and there is nothing beyond the natural world. And so it's kind of these like two ideas put into one belief system or philosophy. And so this guy says these words. He says, whether there was a historical Jesus or not, the earliest Christians, and by the way, I'm going to expect you to respond to this right afterwards. This is a statement as a question. But he says the earliest Christians believed he was an extraterrestrial who descended from outer space and then reascended into the stars to communicate with them from beyond the grave. Once we accept this, the proposal that Jesus never even existed becomes more intelligible and more coherent with the surviving evidence. Your response?
Some people just are wasting their time going to school. That's about all I can say.
This guy's written multiple books.
Yeah, and having a PhD and saying that the earliest Christians believed that Jesus was an extraterrestrial. Just foolish. I mean, what do you really say to something like that? It's like, here are people that go to school, to get an education, to learn things, and then just say things that even the most common people know are not true. You don't even have to be educated to know. Could it really have been that the early Christians believed that Jesus was an extraterrestrial, but just for some reason forgot to put that in the Bible? Just slip their minds that maybe, oh, that's right, Jesus was an alien. How come none of us put that in there? Oh, how could we have been so foolish? It's like, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So total clarity here. I didn't actually, I was specifically researching for this and I came across that, but I came up with the title first. And so the reason I put that down is because when you try to like, there's these kind of, we talked about this before, the word is anthropomorphize, right?
Yes.
Okay. I got it this time. We tend to basically make God human. In the way we view God, we try to give him human attributes so we can relate to him. And you've mentioned this before, the Bible does that in a lot of ways. The Bible actually relates mysteries in a way we can understand them, and it's kind of hard to make this connection for some folks. And in some cases, there's this idea of revelation and God kind of giving you glimpses into things that are sometimes far beyond our natural understanding. When you think about who Jesus is and who he was and what the Bible talks about him doing, things like being born of a virgin in the very beginning, at the very end, him ascending into the heavens, physically, like actually flying into heaven, basically, and the disciples just standing there and like gazing at what he's doing, and then he's gone, and him having relationship with man, yet not being even physically there with them, but his spirit being there. And so, that's just the outsides of Jesus' existence. But then you look into his time while he was here, performing miracles, predicting the future, and the perception of the disciples. And when they look at him, they say, what manner of man is this, that the wind and the waves obey him? And they're looking at, people coming up, never a man spoke like this. So they're quite like, who is this guy? And so the point of this podcast is really to just Christianity 101. Who is Jesus? Let's make this super simple. Some church folks might think this is totally elementary, but the point of this podcast obviously isn't necessarily geared at church folks. And so how do we explain who Jesus was? What was his purpose while he was here? Was he actually a natural man? Did he go through natural human processes and growths and learning and all that stuff? But you look at how Jesus responds, things he says, my kingdom is not of this world. For this reason, I came into the world. He says these things, and it's like, okay, who was Jesus? Was he a man? Was he God? Was he an alien, a ghost? Was he a spirit that looked like a man? He walked through walls at one point in the scripture. So you just put together all these mysterious things. Let's just narrow the entire thing down. Who is Jesus?
Well, I think first of all to say that the podcast is geared towards non-Christian people. I'm fine that Christian people watch it, but my hope is that non-Christian people will watch it and will learn some things. And so when it comes to this kind of thing, the thinking about who God is, thinking about who we are, I think really does have to be, you have to have a level of understanding of those kinds of things, that we aren't God, we are human. And so when God interacts with humanity, he's not going to interact like he's interacting with himself. It's going to be too much, and we wouldn't be able to handle that. And so he does a lot of things that show that he's God, but at the same time, well, you have to understand that Jesus, as the man, was fully a man. And that is very, very important, because otherwise, for God to become a man is immaterial. It's a meaningless exercise, because he's coming as something that he's not, pretending to be something that he's not, so that we can follow him in order to be something that we can't become. And so it's not like that. We can be like Jesus was on the earth. And that is, for the most part, I think most people get that. The concept of the idea, like somebody who says something like Jesus is an alien. Evolutionists are the only one that have something to prove or disprove in the case of God. And that's why they say things like that, is because they are out to disprove God. They claim that there is no need to disprove God because the burden of proof is on the church and is upon Christians. But the truth of the matter is, if they didn't set out to prove that God didn't exist, then they would be out of a job. They would be out of an existence. There'd be no reason for them. To just say, oh, I don't believe in God, and then just go your merry way, just means you just become, just a brick in a huge building, a meaningless brick in a huge building. And so when it comes to Jesus and these kinds of things, I think it's important to understand that these things are said on purpose. They're not said accidentally. I don't really believe that many of the things that these evolutionists say, that I don't think that they really believe it. To be honest, they're only saying it to give themselves relevance, and I don't think that they personally believe those things. I think they just do it to get a rise out of Christians, really. And so the whole idea of Jesus and who Jesus is, for you and I, is Jesus was a man. So that whole 3-year period of time, well, including his childhood up to 33 years old, before his death. It's very important to understand this is before his death, because you asked a couple of questions in there. Before his death, he was completely a man. And there are numerous times in the scriptures where he manifests himself in that way. He manifests that he doesn't know things. He says, only my Father in heaven knows the day or the hour. Of his second coming, and even the angels in heaven don't know. And so he's not playing games there. We may not understand how it can be that Jesus, as the man, can be completely incapable of remembering or knowing things that he obviously must have known. Like his own return. He must have known that. But in that case, because we struggle with that, it's not. I find personally, as somebody who knows Jesus personally, that the easiest way to deal with these issues is stop worrying about trying to make sense of them at a human level. Because there's no point. Everything in existence is not human. There are things we don't understand that we're trying to discover, and we may be able to discover things and then boil them down to ways we can articulate. But when it comes to the universe in general, that's never going to happen. We're never going to just one day just talk ho-hum the universe, no big deal. We know everything there is to know about the universe. We've been creating life for years. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're not getting close to that happening. And again, evolution, scientists will try to convince you that we've already got the building blocks for life and we just have a few more pieces to put together and everything's going to be. But that's not the case. And so when it comes to Jesus and understanding him as all man, because he made the decision to empty himself of his godhood, it's very important for us to understand that, because he has a brain like we have. He has abilities like we have. He has limitations like we have. But the Bible says he was able to live without sin. And so I think that's very important for us to understand that the reason why Jesus could live without sin is because he understood the dynamics of living a life without sin as a human, and he lived that out. And so it wasn't because he was God that he didn't sin. The way that the scripture says he was in all points tempted like we are, yet without sin, is there's an understanding there that he was victorious in a way that no human has been able to be victorious, in overcoming sin entirely. That doesn't mean that it's not possible for humans. And I think that's something that we need to just get a hold of, is that it is possible. We may not know how to do it, but it is possible. And Jesus showed us how, as a man, how to do that. And that's why all those things are so important, of understanding Jesus as a man. And so, but after his resurrection, you mentioned about him walking through walls, and he was able to do that after the resurrection. And that's very important to understand, because he has a resurrected body. And what that is a foreshadowing of how things are going to be after the resurrection. That's going to be a reality to mankind. To mankind, that we will be able to walk through walls and things like that, because it's the issue of a resurrected body. Jesus started acting very differently after the resurrection. He would show up, unexpectedly. He would materialize and then dematerialize, which he never did during the 3 years that he was with his disciples. There was never a time where he would do that. And there's some of the discredited, I don't know exactly what to call them, but I will call them discredited books of the Bible. In other words, they weren't actually scripture. They were written by people that were trying to propagate something. And you'll read of things like that where Jesus is doing magic, all the time, but that was never the case. Before Jesus was resurrected, died and was resurrected, he never did anything other than what normal humans do. He ate like normal humans ate. He slept. He did all those things. But after the resurrection, he had an enhanced ability to do things. He could materialize at places. He did that with the disciples a couple of times, and then he ascended back into heaven. And so these are not things that he's doing as God. It's not like all of a sudden now he's God. No, this is a man in a resurrected body. And so it's important for us to see that this is something that, for me personally, it's something I look at as something to look forward to. Is heaven's going to heaven, and being in heaven isn't just going to be Earth 2.0. It's not going to be just the same thing. It's going to be different. There's going to be very different dynamics involved in that. So it's important for us to to kind of grasp that. And that's what Jesus was representing. So he came as a man, and then as an improved man, you can say, after his resurrection, but was all man.
So you mentioned, the best way to deal with these types of things, that idea from our perspective. But I'm wondering, how do you get past, the disciples were with him for years, and we're still, even towards the end, trying to understand him. They were like trying to understand his motivations until his crucifixion, and then resurrection. They're like, oh, okay, we kind of get it now. Like they were, obviously it wasn't like they were just failing the entire time, but there was this gap. They were like trying to figure Jesus out. They were trying to figure out, like, even at the end, trying to figure out, are you going to restore the kingdom to Israel? And so there was like this gap in understanding why he was here and who he was. We're still talking about understanding Jesus.
Yeah.
But so
well,
how do you get past that?
Okay.
Get past the human limitation.
Well, that's not getting past, in that situation, what you just described isn't getting past the human limitation. That's the reality. They didn't know what he came to do. It wasn't a question of who he was. They had already gotten past that. You are the Son of God. Peter said that. He said, "Where shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We're convinced that you came from God." And so all of the idea of Jesus being God on the earth as a man, that part is something, you have to just get past. But what he came to do, that's a whole nother story, because that's the actual core of what we should be focusing on, is what exactly did Jesus come to do? What was his intention of coming to earth?
The next point.
And dealing with that from that standpoint of why do all of that? And what does that have to do with us? But that's not something that you get past. That's something that you spend your whole life learning. That's as a follower of Jesus. That will be your life from here on out, of discovery of what Jesus came to do and what that means today. Because Jesus coming to the earth had a meaning then. It had a meaning later on. It had a meaning, several centuries later. It now has meaning several millennia later. But there's different dynamics involved in those kinds of things, but it's still relevant. Jesus is just as relevant today as he was 2,000 years ago. Yeah. That's the thing that, again, this is one of those things that, non-believers, I won't just limit it to evolutionists, because it's not evolutionists, but non-believers, anti-believers, it would probably be the best way to describe them, is that because, they just want to bury their head in the sand when it comes to the realities of things. Jesus is real in every country. There's no country where Jesus is not real. There's no society that doesn't believe that Jesus is real. Every society believes that Jesus is real. There may be individuals within those societies that don't believe, but every society believes that Jesus is real. You're not going to walk into a place and say, do you believe that Jesus is real? And they're going to go, no. Oh, we've heard that story come from over there in those other countries, but in our country, we don't believe that. There's no such place. There's just no such place. Even countries that have made laws against believing in Jesus, still doesn't make any difference. It doesn't change anything. And so it's important that we understand that Jesus is very, very relevant to the world today, and what that means to us is very important.
So Kay's asking, do you think believers need to understand... unbelievers need to understand Jesus from the angle of needing proof that he's real?
Do I think, saying believers would just make that all weird. Yeah. Do you think unbelievers need to understand Jesus from an angle of needing proof that he is real? I will answer that by saying I am personally convinced. I can't prove this, but I'm convinced that everybody knows that Jesus is real. There isn't a single soul that doesn't know that Jesus is real.
What do you mean by that?
They know. They just don't want him to be real. It's just as simple as that. It's just, I don't want to believe in a God that there's enough. So to qualify it, that God has hidden himself enough that we can pretend that God isn't real and we can convince ourselves that he's not, but not entirely. It's not a 100%. And again, that's why you have people that will say things. Why is this man who has this brilliant education, he's great, he's discovered all the mysteries of the universe and he knows everything and he's just going to teach us wonderful things. Why is he wasting time on Jesus if Jesus is just a fairy tale? It just doesn't make any sense for people to do this. Richard Dawkins says that I believe in believing in Jesus is like believing in unicorns and Father Christmas and garden fairies, garden fairies, I think he's. And but so he has become world renowned for being an atheist. Why are you doing that? Would that, think about the difference between that and being world renowned as a PhD botanist who doesn't believe in Santa Claus. So what? There are people without degrees that don't believe in Santa Claus. Not believing in Santa Claus is not a big deal.
Yeah.
But you believing or not believing in God, that seems to be a really big deal to you, to not believe in God. What does that tell you? They believe in God. They believe in God but live in denial, and that it's as simple as that.
So what do you think is like the motivating factor behind them pushing the idea?
It's part of
self-serving or
well,
what?
no, I mean it's
they found out a way to make money off of it or what?
Well, I mean some of it is that I'd have no doubt, but a lot of it is just simply the reality that man has always wanted to be God. And so this is the way to be God is I'm more powerful because I can outspeak the God of the universe. The classic things like, the classic, if God's real, let him strike me down right now. What does that prove or not prove? If you were struck by lightning, does that prove that God exists? Just because you said that? So all of a sudden what you say is really the most important thing in the universe. See, it's just us playing God. That's all it is we just like to play God. Like little kids like to play grown-ups, adults like to play God, and it's the same mentality. It's the same level of immaturity of just not understanding God is, this is not up for debate. God is, so the idea of needing to have proof of God's existence is completely unnecessary because God is. The issue, and I've yet to ever run into anybody who has been willing to very simply do this, as I always say, if you want to know if God's real or not, just ask him. Just ask him. And then I usually hear things, well, that's just stupid. How can I ask something that I don't believe in? Exactly. That's the problem, is you can't ask something that you don't believe in. So stop not believing. Mm-hmm. Why are you not believing? It's not like you're doing this because of evidence. You're doing this because you don't want there to be a God. You don't want to believe, or you want God to dance to your tune. I want him to come down here, show himself to me, do this trick, do that trick. It's like, no, God is God, you're not. And if you just get over that, then you can discover God. You can meet God. Just ask him. He'll make himself real to you. He's not trying to hide himself from people. It's the only issue that stands in the way is our pride, our unwillingness to humble ourselves.
So when Jesus was walking the earth physically, the disciples had him as a reference and they could get to know him personally, like you and me talk to each other. They talk to each other. And so what does that look like now? How does a person, young, old, whatever status in life they are, how do they get to know Jesus without that physical, presence?
Yeah. Yeah.
What does getting to know Jesus look like now?
So it starts, like I said, you have to ask Jesus, make himself real to you. And you have to be willing to let him be who he is. See, this is the thing that It's a really easy concept, but for some reason, it's very hard for humanity, us as humans, to accept. Is the fact is that God is God, and he's not going to play by our rules. So if you totally just decide, okay, I'm going to let God be God, and I'm going to let him show me who he is, and I will change to accommodate who he is, because I don't want to be at odds with the God of the universe. And if we will do that, then we can know the God of the universe. He's quite happy to make himself real. You look in the beginning, he creates Adam and Eve, and he just comes to hang out with them.
Yeah.
He's not. This is not an issue, of him. Okay, like this or that or the other thing. No, he's quite happy to be with them, until they sin, and then once they sin, then the whole thing starts to break down. God, they heard God walking in the garden, and they hid themselves when they disobeyed. Well, that's the last time you hear of God walking in the garden until we get to Jesus. There's a couple of manifestations, angelic visitations, that are, pre-incarnate versions of Jesus on occasion that show up, these various beings that show up who are, like Jesus as in another form kind of a thing, until he comes and literally walks in the garden, as Jesus. So there's, and he can only do that by emptying himself, being God. In other words, he can't hang out with us and be God at the same time. He had to empty himself in order to do that, because the only way that he can be with us is when we are willing to turn from sin entirely, and that's, for me, it's real interesting, and I try to do this without trying to be, well, not so trying to be, but trying not to sound cynical, or sarcastic. But as a Christian, I discovered, even from when I first became a Christian, I discovered that not everyone who calls themselves a Christian is a Christian. I mean, that was one of the first revelations that I got, was when I went to the church that I went to where I got saved in Tucson. I had been to other churches, and not a lot, but I'd been to other churches, and none of them were like that church. None of them. But yet they're filled with people who claim to know Jesus, but none of them did. And the reason why I know none of them did is because after I met Jesus, I realized these people, they never met Jesus. Just the way that when you know somebody, when somebody doesn't know them.
Yeah,
And so this isn't a matter of arrogance and I know Jesus better than other people. It's when you really get to know somebody, you can tell when other people don't. And that was, like I said, one of the first things I realized is there were people who they're living by their rules, and not by God's rules. And they claim to know him, but they don't know him. They only believe in him. Mm-hmm. They don't know him. They only believe in him, and they believe him, and they've read the Bible, and they've read parts of the Bible, and they know stories out of the Bible. And for them, that's the same as knowing somebody. And it's not. That is not the same as knowing Jesus. Reading stories in the Bible and going to church is not knowing Jesus. That is not knowing Jesus. There is a place for reading the Bible and understanding the history of God, because that history helps to build a bio for us to kind of get a hold, like you were talking about earlier, the plan of God. And so there is a place for the Bible from that standpoint, but actually knowing Jesus is relative to your obedience. And I'm going to be preaching about this a little bit over the weekend, because the idea, this is why some people really never know very much about Jesus. Why? Because I'm going to be talking about the idea of besetting sins. And part of the issue of besetting sins is you keep doing the same sin over and over again. And the reason is because you just never got a revelation about it. or this, you just, he talks about laying aside every weight and the sin that easily besets us. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to be preaching that tomorrow. The when you're having these reoccurring issues in your life, that are they're not, they are, I don't know how to phrase it. It's not so much that they're not Christian, but they're a poor example of being a Christian. And these are things in your life that you just can't help. It's not because you're human, it's because you don't know Jesus like you might think you do, or else you wouldn't be doing those things. See, because that's the thing, is we wouldn't be doing those things. I just think, I think, just look at how Christians, even if you look over the centuries, Christian groups that were involved in the Crusades and wars and things like that. I think you can't have known Jesus and done that, because Jesus would have never done that. Jesus wouldn't be there egging on a bunch of people to kill other people in the name of Christ. Just wouldn't do that. When the disciples wanted to call fire down from heaven, he said, "You guys, you don't even know what spirit you're of." But to think, and there, that's written in the Bible, and you can see it very clearly that, like I said, part of the bio of Jesus is knowing that Jesus isn't into killing people just because they don't believe in him. And so if that's how Jesus is in the Bible, then he's still like that today, and he was still like that during the Crusades. And so you're talking about a lot of people who are just fighting over religious nonsense.
Yeah.
You're not talking people who know Jesus. They don't know Jesus. They don't have a clue. Or that wouldn't have happened, and that's the case. And the founding fathers of America, there's been, there's question about how different things had happened, during that period of time of giving, blankets to the Indians that had smallpox on it and stuff like that. And I remember somebody I knew who was of Indian descent had mentioned that. And I as a Christian, said that. And I said, then you can only come to two conclusions, right? One of two conclusions is either they weren't Christians, and so let's stop calling them Christians, or that didn't happen. Because there is no in between. It's not Christians who gave smallpox blankets to Indians.
Yeah.
There's no such thing. Okay.
Yeah.
There's no such thing. It's just not a reality. Okay. And so, not people who know Jesus, because people who know Jesus would never do such a thing. So take that and extend that out to the full experience of humanity. And if there are things that we are doing, claiming to be Christians, that are a bad example to other people of Christianity, then that's just a reflection of how little we know of Jesus. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is that's the issue, because we wouldn't do it otherwise. If we did genuinely know Jesus like that, like we should, then we wouldn't do those kinds of things that would cause us to have a poor example, or be a poor example to other people.
So what, talking about, like, again, getting to know Jesus, and like, what is, then they could ask Jesus a question directly. How do you ask Jesus a question now?
In prayer. I mean, I just ask, it's just usually in prayer, the answer to a question, sometimes it will come fairly quickly, but usually if it comes fairly quickly, it's because of something out of the Bible, like a question I'm thinking about, and I'm praying, I'm saying, okay, God, show me this. Show me this. How does this apply here today? This principle, and then something in the Bible. But normally, it's something that I just kind of follow, ask the question, and kind of follow the leading of what I believe to be the answer as it takes me along. And usually, that's something that unfolds over time, and so I can see what it was, what the full answer is, because, like, for example, I think I had mentioned this in a sermon, of just issues of financial issues. There are times, it was a Friday night, I talked about it Friday night in our Bible hangout, that sometimes, even after being saved for as many years as I have, there can be a circumstance, it's unusual, that where I still need to recalibrate my thinking about something. It's not an idea of just getting to a place where you never have to do that anymore. And it had to do with a specific convergence of financial issues. that were all happening at the same time. There's a number of things, a number of issues of bills that were coming due, bills that I knew I was going to need to pay, large bills that were going to be coming in the future, um, stock market unreliability, bank account issues, of what to do with, tax decisions, all these things kind of converging all at once that brought me to a place of thinking, should I do something about my financial situation? Should I do something? Should I make some sort of correction? And so I was praying about that. What does that look like? Should I, and I had mentioned to Elliot, talking to you about the possibility of working at Lunar and taking a job in IT at Lunar. And, the issue was not a lack of faith. It wasn't, oh, you lack faith. You just don't have any faith. That's an oversimplification of things. The issue is that my current level of faith didn't incorporate that particular financial convergence of things. And so I started thinking about it from the standpoint of, okay, maybe I can do something to fix my financial situation in such a way that I'm still able to do the will of God, And so that was something that I began to pray about and have been praying about. And Elliot kept telling me, so are you going to do this? Are you going to do this? And I said, I don't know. I said, I'm just praying about it right now. And he said, but why are you doing this? I said, I told you, I don't know. It's not, I just threw it out there as an option, as a possibility, or, a way of moving forward in these financial situations. I mean, of course, every situation in life can be distributed to the faith pile, where I just believe God for everything, and do nothing, which is where you have this group of people who don't know Jesus at all, who are absolutely useless in not only in the church, but in life in general, because they have learned how to live without anything, I mean, literally anything, without doing or having anything, and have become completely useless because they have great faith. And it's not that they have great faith, it's that they are okay being a waste of space. And that's not Christianity. And that's not faith either. Faith, is the substance of things hoped for. It's not the absence of things hoped for.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I don't hope for anything. I don't believe God for anything. So I've got the most faith in the world. No, you don't. You don't have any faith at all. You've got zero faith, because faith is believing God for things, to do things, to achieve, to accomplish things. That's the whole idea of faith. Faith does, it's not just, a way of thinking. Faith achieves, it accomplishes. And so in this situation, it was something that I wanted to achieve, to accomplish, but how much of it should I take care of, and how much of it should God take care of? And so my whole point in sharing that is that I asked as a question, and have been praying, and have been looking for God's direction in that, and haven't moved anywhere from that, because I haven't got a clear answer to try to move in any kind of direction. And so there it lies, And then as those sort of target moments begin to unfold, of things like I mentioned, all those individual things, like say the stock market all of a sudden turned around tomorrow and everything's wonderful and everybody's happy again. Okay, well, that will factor in, if once I do all the, my financial work with taxes and various things like that, and then I know exactly how much I owe in taxes, well, then I'll know, what the next move is, from there. So there are things that are going to materialize that will help me to see, the right way to go, and so, yes, you could look at that and say, well, that's what everybody does. No, it's not the same thing. It's that I'm looking for certain things to happen in certain ways. And if those things happen in certain ways, then I know God is involved in it, so it's more like doing the combination on a lock, than just spinning wheels and, seeing if things get better. It's, turning the dials and then realizing, okay, this is actually going somewhere. I'd say maybe more like picking a combination lock. If anybody's ever tried to do that when you're younger, maybe those high school or grade school bike locks that, you step on one end of it, pull on the other end, and just keep turning the dial until the thing pops open. There's progress. There are things that you experience that are progress. You're going forward. And so that's kind of how it is with me and these situations, is that I know there will be a moment of clarity sometime in the future, of which way to go, and it'll be, no, this is the way, because I've been in situations like this before, so it's kind of a long answer, but it's asking God a question is not God just telling you how to do things. God doesn't just go, okay, this is how you do it, and just do it and get it done. He wants us to learn how to think like he thinks, so there's a process of thinking, so asking him, even Jesus didn't, coming to think about that. And I'm kind of going longer than I'm comfortable with, but hopefully this is helpful. But the idea of going forward in things is like I said, it's learning how to think like God thinks, is very important, to understand that God's concerned about how we think, about things, not just doing what we're told. There's an autonomy to it.
So can you give me like a simpler explanation? Maybe not simpler, but more elementary answer, mainly around like, so because what you just said it sounded like there's some context of experience there. Like you kind of, I'm looking for things to happen in a certain way that will show me God's involved in it, or the direction. And so because
there are thoughts in my mind. There are thoughts in my mind that I feel that God is kind of putting there.
Right.
And so it helps me because I know I'm human, and I'm not, trying to. When Jesus was on the earth, he spoke in parables.
Right.
Okay. So it wasn't like just when they asked him a question, they got a straight answer.
Yeah.
It's not like that. There's always, in dealing with Jesus, it was always with the idea of learning things, not just being told what to do. And so you have to understand that this is part of our relationship with Jesus,
right,
is learning how to think the way that he thinks.
But how do you apply that though? Then say we're talking, the curious. We're talking to the curious. We're talking to the new Christian. We're talking to the new convert. I've never asked God a question. How do I ask God a question, and how do I expect, or how should I expect the answer to come?
Well, that's what I'm explaining. Is the idea is asking the question is, just asking the question. I ask it in my mind. I'm praying. That's prayer is communication with God. You don't have to be in a certain posture or in a certain location to pray. You can pray anywhere. You can pray in your car. You can pray, just walking down the street. You can pray anywhere. It doesn't matter. You can talk to God wherever you're at. What I find is, and I believe this is supported biblically, like I said in Jesus in parables, is that Jesus will challenge my thinking, with things, So, what would, like, for example, if it was just, let's go to something more basic that isn't something that I have to deal with, but something that people who are learning how to trust God have to deal with, is something like, for example, tithing. Okay, tithing 10% of your money, giving 10% of your money is like, oh my God, 10%. That's how am I going to survive off of 10%, 90% of what I make? There's just no way. Well, when you are tithing and you're saying, or you have bills, for example, that are coming due that you're going to have trouble with, and, because you are tithing, then that's the time to be speaking to God and saying, God, I'm doing this. I'm tithing. I'm being faithful, but I have these bills. What do I do? How do I handle them? Because it would be easy for me to just not tithe and take the money and give it. And then you'll see what happens is that God begins to lead in directions, as well as doing miracles. I'm not trying to avoid the idea of miracles. I'm just trying to say that everything is not a miracle.
Right.
Every answer is not a miracle.
Yeah.
But, like Jesus told Peter, go take a fish, a fishing rod and throw it in, catch a fish, open the fish, and the fish will have a coin in it. Now, let's hope that Jesus never tells me to do something like that, because I'm not very good at catching fish. I don't know anything about catching fish. It's going to be a real difficult time. I'm probably going to be there for days trying to catch a fish, for God to put a coin in his mouth. But for Peter to go and catch a fish, no big deal. And that's the point I'm making, is that Jesus was using Peter's skill as a fisherman combined with a miracle. And so often that's what God will do with us, is he will use our skill, our ability combined with the miraculous. One of the things that's very, very common in Christianity is for people to get jobs beyond their ability. I've seen this happen on numerous occasions of people who get a job, and that job, and they got the job, and it's a miracle that they even got hired. It's not just that it's a miracle that they got that kind of job or get that kind of pay. It's a miracle that they even got hired, because I've seen people who've gotten jobs in certain situations, and I think, how in the world did they not see that you're not qualified for this job?
Yeah.
They just don't see it, that they're not qualified. Because I know these people, I'm talking about people that I know, and I know their skill set, and I know their laziness, and I know their aversion to work, but they get this great job, and I think, oh man, I hope they can keep it, because once they find out who you
they
find out who you really are, they oh, sorry, this ain't working out, But what I'm saying is that that's often how God works. Is He will work with us beyond our ability, and if we're willing to go there, and that's the thing. And so I found, like as a newer believer, when it came to the issue of tithing, I found that, wow, tithing, it's amazing how life just plays ball when you tithe. That was one of the things that before I became a Christian was always a frustration to me, is I would always seem to get ahead, and then something would happen. Didn't matter what. Something would happen that would reverse everything. I would lose my job, or, I get in a car accident and can't drive my car, and something would happen, some unforeseen event in life would happen that would kick me back down the stairs, and then I'd have to climb back up all over again. And that after I became a Christian, that started happening less and less. The more I was obedient to God, the less I was getting kicked down the stairs, having to climb back up all over again. And then realizing I might fall back a stair or two, but it was never back all the way down the bottom of the stairs and come back up again. And learning how to go a couple of stairs back in order to go a couple of stairs forward, that was for me a welcome thing. That's why for me, I could take a job. And this is something I think is very critical that a lot of people are afraid to do, is you start moving forward in things, and especially as a Christian, and then you think that that's just how it's supposed to be. I'm just supposed to go from better to better to better to better, and that's not always the case. Sometimes it's good to pray, and say, God, like for example, there are times where I've taken jobs for less pay. I've been offered jobs for great pay, and have taken jobs for less pay because I know it's the job God wants me to have. I think about it, and I think about how much I'm going to be working, the commute, all these factors. And I think, if I take this job, I'm not going to be able to be as involved in church, and I'm not going to be able to be as involved in the things of God. I'm going to be sacrificing that. And I don't want to do that. Used to be, when I first became a Christian, my attitude was, I'm never going to work on Sunday because I don't want to miss church on Sunday. But now my criteria over the years for work has changed a lot, to the point to where I'm not going to miss church at all for work. And, towards the end, now I'm full-time pastoring, but at that time, it was like, I'm not going to miss church for anything. I'm not going to miss even outreaches, because of work. I'm not going to miss anything. And so if there's something going on, some kind of an event, and I'm asked to work, no, I'm not going to be there, and if that means I'm not going to get a promotion, or that means I'm going to be, passed by for, wage increases, things like that, well, so be it, because I've learned how to think like Jesus. And I've learned that I can live off of less, and not just by cutting back on my expenses, but I can live on less, because Jesus working in my life and me being obedient to God makes life work more favorably. And so I'm not getting hit with things that I'm not expecting. And not all of a sudden getting these, letters in the mail. You owe us $5,000,
Okay, so we got about 3 questions here. Kay, I'm sorry I saw your question, but skipped you. But she says you mentioned
which one? There's like 4 questions.
Yeah,
there, 4
there's
or 5 questions.
yeah. Her question was you mentioned our pride is standing in the way. This is when you were talking about us knowing God's real, but not wanting it to be. She says, you mentioned our pride is standing in the way. Is pride the same context of ego regarding your statement?
Well, yeah, pride and ego, I think, are just kind of related to each other.
Yeah.
It all comes down to that at the end of the day. It's us not wanting to humble ourselves.
So when you say you're looking for a certain thing to happen, and that will be what shows you that God is in it, how do you practically know it's going to be God other than just a sense, is the idea of laying out the fleece?
Well, okay, so that idea of laying out a fleece from Gideon, that God honored that, and God does honor that, but that, like many things in the Bible, that's not meant to be, used as the reference, for how we're supposed to act, and there are times where, God is very patient. Abraham does a similar thing of, is there 50 righteous people? Are you still going to judge it? No. Okay. Well, how about 40? Okay. How about 30? All right. Listen, 20. Okay. All right. What? Okay. 10. Just, what about that? Yeah. And it's like, why not just say, okay, God, how many?
Yeah.
Why keep dropping it down? But so there is a place for talking with God about things. But I'm a little reluctant at the idea of fleece, because I'm often looking for, I'm trying to think of some specific event that I can use as an example. But often it's like, okay, so here's one that just popped into my mind, because this has been different in different times. Right now I'm looking for a place to live. And every place is expensive that's showing up. It's expensive. And I'm thinking, is this going to advance the will of God for my life? If I live in this house, is this going to help? Is this going to be beneficial? And so the things I'm looking for is there enough space to have people over? Obviously, if I can't have people over, then there's no point in living there, because I'm not going to be, working with people in my home. It'll just be a base of operation. I can drive in my car and save money. And so that's not a big deal, and so there's nothing practical there. And so I'm just like, okay, so looking at different things, and I have a place where I'm living right now, so there's no hurry on that. And changing, like I said about this financial issue, so that would be one of those factors that would change financially. Is this worthwhile doing? Not is it value for money? It's not what I'm talking about at all. But is this worthwhile? Is this even worth putting that kind of, getting into that kind of position? And so, which is part of that helps maybe for those of you who are still trying to work out what I'm talking about financially. That was part of one of those factors of financial factors all coming together that I'm praying about. And so, but when I moved back from Maryland here, I prayed and said, God, I don't want to look for a house. I want a house, and I want it to be in an area where you want us to be, and to be laboring there. And so if something comes up, or just, I'd rather you just gave me something. And so Mariah came and she found a place, and it was as much as what we were paying before we left. And so that wasn't a factor. And you know, it was available and it was in San Mateo, and it was like, yeah. So I had Clarissa go over and take her phone and just do kind of a video walkthrough. And I looked at it, but like I do with most houses, I don't actually look. I feel. I just try to feel. I feel like, yeah, this will work, or God's in this, or is it like, nah, this is not. No, I'm just making this happen. And it was like, no, it's fine, nothing fine. I had nothing stuck out like there was really bad about it. And we got there, the plumbing was absolute shambles, and our power goes off all the time, and there are all kinds of little inconveniences that house has had. But
welcome to California.
Yeah, but it was like, yeah, this is the house. And we've been there for 7 years, and I haven't really wanted to move. There hasn't been really any desire to move until we moved the church to San Carlos. It's like, I could live here forever, And then over the years, the landlord has been very gracious to us. And one of the things that always happens in Northern California is rent increases, regularly. And we haven't had a rent increase in, years. I can't even remember how many years.
9. I think she's talking about years. Mariah says 9. I don't know what she's referring to. I think she's talking about years you've lived there. 9.
I don't know. I guess how many years I don't.
There's like a 20-second delay, Mariah. We have
I
no
didn't
idea
know.
what you're talking about.
I didn't know. Did I say something about 7 years?
I don't know. I
Maybe
think you might have said 7.
Years,
Yeah, probably.
But anyway, so the idea is that, so that was a different situation. Okay. So going back to when I was in Spain, we went to look for a house, couldn't find a house. And then I prayed and I said, God, I'm not looking for a house, period. I'm not even going to look for a house. You're going to get me one, because I've looked and we've run out of time. And there's a whole scenario behind that I've shared before. But the bottom line was, we had a house that totally fell through the last day before we were leaving. We didn't get anything laid out. And I was so upset, because it was something that was very much within our grasp to have. And it was one of those moments, I don't know how to describe it. It was one of those moments when you are being tested, and not by God. And it's not a question of being tested by God. That the devil has shown up and said, hey, I want to, screw around with this guy. And God says, what do I have to do with that? And then it's on, and it was one of these moments. I said, all right, God, fine then, fine. I'm not looking for a house. If we end up homeless on the streets when we get off the plane, that's on you, because, I had done everything within my ability to do this. This did not happen because of a lack of planning on my part. And so we got a phone call. The property manager said, we've got a place for you. And I said, great. And I said, let's talk about how I wire the money. And she says, well, this is what it's going to cost. And I said, yeah, fine. How do I wire you the money? And she, well, do you want to get pictures of it? I said, no, I don't want pictures. Just how do I send you the money? I need a house. And that's all there is to it. We're going to be leaving in a few weeks, and I don't want to mess with this anymore. I don't even want to think about it anymore. And so she says, okay. And so I wired her the money, and then we got there, and the house was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. But I knew in that case, God would be in it, because I wasn't giving him any options. And you might have a hard time with that. But when you know God and you have a relationship with God, there are times when you have the go ahead from God to be nervy, to be able to say, God, you know what? I'm tired of this. I'm not gonna cow to this garbage of the world and stupid stuff. I'm just gonna believe you in this. And God's like, yeah, I'm glad you feel that way. It's like, you are my son, so there's more to it. So I'm just saying all around is that, because you're asking me about how do you talk to God, is like, that's how I talk to God.
Yeah.
And how God talks back. Is there audible voices? Sometimes, rarely, sometimes, sometimes there's just 100% confidence that God is speaking to me. Other times there's just a feeling that, God is with me. But again, like I said, this all comes down to the fact that God wants to have a relationship with us, and he wants us to think the way he thinks. and we wreck it for ourselves by trying to make God human.
Okay, we have one more question, and I think what I'm going to do is actually work the second portion of this podcast because we didn't even start the second portion, but I think it would work on its own podcast. So
Okay.
yeah, I'll work that into another one. Brittany's asking, so if believers are seeming to get kicked back down the stairs, as you said, do you think that's because they aren't making obedient choices?
Yes is the short answer. Yes, but obedience is a longer thing, because the idea of obedience is something you learn, and sometimes you learn it by getting kicked down the stairs. Jesus, the Bible says Jesus learned through the things he suffered. He learned obedience through the things he suffered. So technically that could be called being kicked down the stairs. And so yes, there is an obedience factor, but it's not like that there's some sort of obedience perfection, that once you reach the pinnacle of obedience perfection, that nothing bad ever happens to you again, and sometimes you feel like you're going to go down the whole flight of stairs, but sometimes you only go down a couple, but you're afraid that you're going to go all the way down, but something catches you and you can get back up and you can move forward. And so I want to be careful with that, is that the short answer is yes, it's an obedience issue, but at the same time, we got to keep from getting this idea in our heads that there's some sort of obedience perfection, that you can reach. Sometimes, things happen and they're learning moments. That's why I'm doing Teachable Moments, the series Teachable Moments on Sunday morning, is because these were things that happened that were teachable moments. They were moments where Jesus was trying to communicate, or took advantage of to communicate something more for the next time, or from here on out. Like I said about the baptism thing, is the idea of well, okay, yes, baptism was just for sinners, but from here on out, I'm going to show you something a little bit different about baptism. So sometimes that's the case. So,
okay, 8:02. I think we will go very long if I start asking any more questions, but we have accomplished at least a portion of what I was trying to accomplish tonight. So, quick answer: is Jesus an alien? We should invite Richard Carrier onto this podcast.
Is Jesus an alien? Not the implied way.
Yeah.
Not the implied way that he's, that they believed he was like from another galaxy or something like that. He was an alien in the sense that he's God who's become a man that we can't relate to. So yes, and that is, at some point you do have to accept the fact that God is alien to you.
Yeah. You
have to accept that because he is God. And Jesus has ascended back into heaven, so he's no longer a human. That doesn't mean that there was no benefit from his human experience, because his human experience set the example for us. There's so much in this, so much in this.
That's probably why I got too much into the podcast.
And the whole idea that I wish you had called it a different title, though. We'll have to see if we can't work on something. The idea of God as an alien is like such a back room, 5 people with tinfoil hats kind of.
What do you mean? This is not bad.
No. I'm happy with the amount of people that are. I'm happy with the idea that are listening. But anybody who's not in our orbit already might think, "What in the world is that all about?" But anyway, yes, that's the bottom line. Is Jesus is foreign to us, and we have to understand that, and get our minds around the idea is that we're trying to understand something that is beyond us, but at the same time, God is doing everything he can to help us do that. It's not just, leaving it all up to us to figure all this out. And so it's just understanding the balance between those things that's most important. But I'm glad it went this way. I really am, because I really wasn't sure. I had no idea where this whole alien idea was going to go towards. But it has been something that's been on my mind a lot,
Yeah.
Just this whole idea of how people just, how many people, that just really don't know Jesus, and I'm always trying to come up with a why, and I come up with one thing, and then I come up with another and another, and I preach on it. This is it. No, this is it. And there's always something more, but I think it really does come down to the fact is that we really do misunderstand who God is and who we are. And if we would take more time to do both, we could make things a lot easier on ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we just, other people can look at us and they can tell when we're lying. Why can't we tell when we're lying? Why do we think we're telling the truth when we're lying? Why do we go through these gyrations in our heads to try to convince ourselves that what we're saying really technically is the truth and really is okay when everything inside of us is saying, no, it's not okay. And becoming a Christian, this makes things worse. I mean, way worse, because because now we're dealing with an entity who's trying to deceive us, the devil. And here we are trying to deceive ourselves into serving God, and it's like, that just doesn't work, And so, understand yourself, understand who God is, and then just let God begin to teach you how to be more like him. It really is that simple, and it'll make life a lot more enjoyable when it's all said and done. Like I said on Sunday night, it's, there's nothing, for me personally, there's nothing greater than to have left the maze.
Yes. So
and stop chasing cheese. That was last Sunday, but
no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Plug.
But,
Yes.
But
plug for last Sunday.
Yeah.
Night.
But that's, there's nothing better. Yeah. There's nothing better. It's a thought that's always on my mind. Why do I want to keep serving God with everything that's within me for the last 40 years? And it's because I don't want to go back to the maze. That's why. I do not want to go back to the maze. I don't want to chase cheese. There's nothing more horrible in all of life than to get up in the morning thinking, oh God, I'm low on cheese again. Like you always are every day. It's just, come on. So much more to life.
Very good. Well, we invite you to join us in person tomorrow night. We will be here at the church. We are located at 1100 Industrial Road, and we're in Suite 10. We have parking. You can park close by. You don't have to walk far, but we invite you to join us in person more than anything else. And we have a totally off-topic question just popped in right this second, so probably right before this. Let's what is this? Okay, totally off topic, but you mentioned something similar. Why is it so hard to see who we really are? How come other people see it so much more clearly?
Because they're not trying to lie to themselves about you. That really is what it comes down to, is we're trying to lie to ourselves about who we are. We just don't like who we are, is really what it comes down to. We don't like who we are. We don't like what we're up to. And so we play games and we deceive ourselves into believing that somehow if we can do things and be things that are not acceptable, for lack of a better way of putting it, that somehow will become acceptable. I mean, it's just it's distorted thinking. Other people can see it and have no problem with it because they're not trying to get anywhere. They're not trying to create some persona that doesn't exist. That's why they can see it. We are.
Okay. Well,
try this one. Try to get out of here one more time. Okay, no more questions.
No more questions. We're done.
No more questions.
Should we wait 30 seconds? All right. Anyway, yes, well, you can find more information and more resource on our YouTube page and our website. But more than anything else, we invite you to join us in person. Come, be a part of a service. You can sit in the back row if you want. You can just observe, but come with an open heart, open mind, bring questions, and God will help you. He will speak to you. And that's it for tonight. We'll see you guys next time.